is also promoting, you know, the free market, dog coins, whatnots. And by
Dog
the way,
face.
I just started the recording, so we are in a sense ready to roll. And this meeting is gonna be interesting to follow who is gonna be speaking next. I mean, I'm rocking it. I love it, so it's okay. You don't have to stop. All right, so the recording is on. So essentially, we are ready to roll. As you may know me, my name is Ferdinando Castro Gonzalez, and alongside Yusha and Orlando, we're here to host the Philosophy Club. Sometimes we receive some help from Mansi, but he's always there in the background just in case, like one of us are missing. He's just a substitute. So, all right. So thank you so much for coming. It's always nice. I'm gonna play the recording for a second. For those who don't know, we usually try to, and I know you said you can just start doing the example. We normally go trying to follow an order, and we just type an exclamation mark like this a little bit. Just you don't have to say please type. Just type it that way we know who is trying to intervene first and we don't skip anybody. If you raise your hand, it's likely that I won't be able to see you and or I'm gonna put somebody before you and I don't want that. Today's topic is the language of truth and imagination. And before I go into it, I'm not completely sure if Nancy has some announcements.
I do. Thank you, Fernando. Great to see everybody. Thanks for coming. Yeah, so just a few things. Again, real quick. I'm Professor Manzi, the faculty advisor of the Dallas College Philosophy Club. And I believe you were introduced to the officers. Yeah, today's topic is going to be a really fascinating one. It's concerned especially with the way imagination works with language and how language works with, again, articulating truth. So our monthly theme is truth. And so today's meeting is about how you, as I said, articulate, how you can make truth discursive. And of course, that's going to take us back to language. I am curious as to what extent people feel like imagination and language go together. Because again, imagination, you have the word image. When you think image, you think, again, pictures. But what if words were a certain kind of image, auditory images, things along these lines? A hermeneutic imagination, an interpretive imagination. And if you all read the email, then I really like those guiding questions. So again, things to consider might be like, can we have thoughts without language? Sure, perhaps we could have images without language, but how do you articulate those images? And again, if words are somehow the epitome of imagination, well, then language seems critical to any sort of conception of truth, whether or not it's the true conception of truth. Having said all that, I invite everybody to check us out on social media. Go to our Instagram page. We just started the Student Spotlight series. You'll see one of our alumni, Marcus, is being spotlighted this week, former officer of the Philosophy Club. And yeah, we'll be doing these periodically, I believe every Saturday. And yeah, check us out. And for the record, everybody's able to be spotlit. So if you're interested in, talking with the officers and having a little personal interview where you talk about philosophy and, share your thoughts on it and your experiences with the Philosophy Club, we're happy to have you. Just reach out to us. You can reach out to us privately on Teams, or of course, you can just let us know in the chat. And of course, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we have a website, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you are one studying philosophy or just want to know more about philosophy, we also have philosopher chats where we help you understand some of those tricky questions on your classes. We don't do tests though, but everything else is in the play rule. Okay, so thank you so much for the introduction. So yeah, this is actually for me a very fascinating topic, not only because of the whole concept of communication, which is so dear to me, but it's also it opens up the whole idea of okay, like what exactly truth is. Like, do truth depends on whether or not we can articulate or not. I mean, we have it there, but if we cannot express what we're seeing, we can't really start like processing really what is going on, because at least in my end, I have this always thinking like, okay, let's say right now, like I'm just looking at my computer, like if I don't manage the language, I wouldn't even be able to say what is in front of me. So it's harder for me to understand something as simple as an object that is in front of me. And I think that's basically part of what it differentiates us from like different animals. Like I think like we as a species, we evolved because we were able to start like making sounds that we all started to connect with each other. And it's not as simple as it may seem, because for instance, like we have to agree in the meaning. Like if we all have different words for the same object, we can't really understand each other, which is harder for us to start like having different ideas and different views on the same object, which is at the end um, defining what is real or not. And I see the man said you have something to say.
Yeah, just building on some of the guiding questions that I articulated moments ago with words, with language. Um, I want to tie back to imagination, I guess, a bit more explicitly. Like, where does imagination end and the intellect begin? Are they really two different things? Or is it more of like a gray area, like a nebulous border between the two? Can we have intelligence without being able to image or imagine things? And then also tying it back to language in particular, are there certain languages, and this is again up for debate, that are maybe better situated, so to speak, with being able to articulate thoughts more clearly, more refined? So things like a more precise form of grammar or a greater lexicon or vocabulary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things along these.
Yeah. Oh wow. Everyone now has to say something. Well, actually, yes. Like it has like a list of 10 people. Actually, yes. I read like a research. Depending on the language that you manage, like primarily, it depends on how your critical thinking is. Like for example, people from Asia, they have a different way of doing critical thinking that it affects them whenever they go outside, because they're very, I don't know, their thinking is way more strict than maybe somebody who uses the language a little bit more freely. Like it is a fascinating thing that I don't manage all the technical term, but it was fascinating. But next in line is Susan. I'm just gonna sit back a little bit and just let the whole knowledge like goes to me, like and that's it.
Haven't met yet. Okay. You guys can hear me, right?
No, you're muted.
No.
Yes,
You
you
almost
are.
got me there. I'm willing to doubt myself, even basic reality. Okay. So I was going to start drawing something, but I'm not going to now. But I was thinking about the relationship between truth, imagination, and concepts. And so that almost made me want to do a little lecture on concepts and what I call the concept triangle, but I will not do that. But I was thinking about my first experiences in philosophy at SMU. I was raised as a Catholic in a Hispanic culture. And people don't believe me, but I did not have a concept of the individual unique self until I read Descartes, especially Meditation 2, and Locke, where he talks about identity. And this whole notion that we can become aware of ourselves as a self in different places and different times, that was really interesting to me because I did not know that as a truth. Okay. The word self and reflection and intelligence, though all those words expanded my imagination of reality, of my own reality, gave me those words that I could be aware of myself as a self in different places and different times. All those words really important to my thinking and realizing that I wasn't part of like a cyborg. I don't know if you guys know that reference. I don't know if I'm dating myself. Okay. But that I wasn't just like some part of collective with no individuality. Right. And so that was really powerful to me, was the words that name fundamental and powerful concepts in the thinking of Descartes and Locke per self, and how that did expand my imagination and sense of truth. So I could go on and on, but now I shall stop. Thank you.
You don't have to stop, but it's just common courtesy. But yeah, I do agree, because also the more words you manage, the more you can like imagine. Like I agree. I'm just gonna keep it short since the line keeps like growing. So Orlando, you're next. Actually, something.
You guys said a lot of good things, so I think I'm gonna keep mine short. But there was one good quote that I really liked that I was talking about the job of the artist. And they say that the job of the artist is basically to create that if which is unimaginable. And it's kind of to bring it to the imagination. And if you think about like all the real what's the word I'm looking like innovators, when you think about like people like Steve Jobs, people like Einstein, so on and so forth. Like a lot of the commonalities that you see is that they're bringing about not only they're using prior experiences and prior phenomenons and bringing about new things that were, I guess, quote unquote, never imagined before. And so when you guys are tying into words and you kind of think about, well, how do words tie in? I think to some extent we kind of have to get away from this very vague idea of words and understand the content behind the words, because when you just focus too primarily on words, you begin to kind of associate like relative ideas. Like for an example is like I think it was a duck image that we were talking about last time. It looked like a duck, but then it looked like a bunny. And it was because what you're doing there is you're picking a very small instance of the picture, and then you're drawing the bigger picture just based on that small instance, regardless of the fact that you don't actually know what that is. And we do that with a lot of topics. We kind of take small instances of the topics, and we essentially think we know all of it because of these very small instances. And I think that relates to imagination in some way or another. But I'll stop there.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. But the more I keep hearing, the more I'm trying to see exactly how much of a if there was any role in the imagination for creating our own words. Because I'm assuming that we all have imagination before we even have something to say. Um, because otherwise, like, I don't know if that makes sense. Because how can we develop words if we don't have, if we're just stagnant? Like, if you're just nothing and you're not trying to profess whatever is that is happening, like, there has to be some process of imagination for you to create the words. So that's basically what I'm starting to think right now. But in the meantime, I know that you said you're next, so just go ahead. And I see Luisa Benton. Hello, Luisa.
Hey, welcome everyone. That's a great discussion going on, actually. And speaking of words and languages, to be specific, words were actually invented by a general consensus and a general agreement. There is no word that was founded without like any agreement. I mean, you would think that for such a powerful tool as any language on the planet, there would be some sort of like a written or a scientific document or anything like that. But in actuality, it was just like people like you and me. So if I want to call the ocean a soup, and I can get enough people to call the ocean soup, then yeah, ocean is soup, and it's simple as that with any given language. So what does it have to do with reality? And with that is, so I speak Arabic, right? I speak four other languages, but my focus is on Arabic primarily. Why? Because it's a very descriptive language. You cannot say something by itself, so it has to be supported with what comes before and after. So with that, it like in English, when I say a sentence, it's up to the person's imagination how they perceive it. Like if I say the apple is red, right? It could be any shade of red, but in Arabic, we have a specific name or title or whatever you want to call it for that color of red that I'm trying to explain. And by itself, that word doesn't mean anything. So it's not left up to the imagination. And Professor Manzi, I know you brought it up earlier that if there is a language complete enough to where it does not necessarily depend on other people's perception of it, then yeah, Arabic is definitely one of those languages because as I mentioned, it's a vast language. It's like a 1400-year-old language, and people still speak it, write it, and communicate with it in the exact same manner as how it was 1400 years ago. So I think that's really interesting to have something like that among us.
Yeah. But now my question is like, what is it in your culture that I mean, not necessarily culture-wise, but why is it that your culture opted not to change much how you speak and how you use those words, but others do? And what is this process? I don't think it's necessarily link with the imagination, but I'm just curious, and I don't know if by trying to explore that way we're gonna diverse from the main topic of today. If it is, you can always just no. It's like no, don't go that route. We can maybe have a different type of discussion for the last theme of the month, which I'm gonna take this moment. We can always just actually vote on the last topic of truth, and that can be one.
Yeah, I can
Anyway.
quickly explain why it is because for us, if you guys may know that Muslims follow Quran, and Quran was given to us by God in Arabic. At least that's how we perceive it. Just like the Bible was in Hebrew. I could
Mm,
which the Bible was originally, but if someone
George can be
Old Testament
George can be
Hebrew, New Testament Koine Greek. There's a little bit of Aramaic in certain spots.
And that is exactly why the language hasn't changed, because we value our holy book so much that if we change anything in our spoken or written language, then it's going to mess up the language that's in the Quran, and that's going to completely take away the meaning. I mean, no offense to anyone, but there are so many different versions of Bible, but there's only one singular version of Quran that is exact to the dot on a freshly printed copy today versus the one that was given to us 1400 years ago. So that is why we don't change the language, and it is complete even in this modern time.
okay. So I see George wants to respond. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. This is off topic, so I'll try to keep it brief. I just wanted to push back a little on the idea that there's lots of different versions of the Bible floating around. There's really not. The text that we have today is like 90, 95, 98% accurate to what the original documents were, and we can test that. We can verify that using the science of textual criticism, where we have texts that we compare and kind of reverse engineer back to the original. So I'm not trying to denigrate the Quran or
Oh, no.
or anything.
I mean, we can
that.
talk about it after the meeting.
Example, like,
the
totally off
meeting
topic.
today, but yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic to talk about religion by itself, like in religion's own entirety. So yeah, if you want, I'm free. We can talk about it.
Yeah, I'll send
Okay.
you a DM.
So now there is an example, clear example of two different truths with different words.
I know.
Yeah, I guess we can always see the relationship in it. Nancy, you're next in the list.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to something that you said, Fernando, where you said, first we need images to inspire words, or maybe inspire thought. And I think it's kind of like a helix in that regard, where it's you see something, maybe the image inspires a thought that is articulated, and then you hear words, and then those words inspire images. Those images inspire words, and those words inspire images. And perhaps this is the sort of the dance of communication. Something else I think we should maybe throw out there for consideration is that going back to our imagination, I wonder if the imagination does in fact encompass, again, language itself. So when Orlando was saying, it's the role of the artist, and he referenced that quote, artists are also poets. They're not merely painters or graphic designers and what have you. And so it seems to me like if you can pen a story, if you could pen a narrative in any language, it seems like that is itself an embodiment of the imagination. And what I mean by that is it doesn't just evoke like these sort of fantasy, like dreamscapes or something like that, but it deepens one's understanding of the world. And this is why I was suggesting earlier, maybe the intellect and the imagination, they're not necessarily these two strictly different categories of human functions, that perhaps they bleed into one another in a way that's more cohesive, where what we call the imagination, what we call the intellect, that's just our way of kind of abstracting from the otherwise pure phenomenon of truth seeking, of understanding, of grasping. We grasp through various kinds of images, auditory, visual, and in that sense, it gets us closer to understanding whatever the truth of that particular phenomenon is. What's so fascinating to me is that language is very plastic. I mean, you could translate one language into another, and you could, of course, interpret or misinterpret or reinterpret old words in new ways and new contexts. That seems like something of the nature of language itself. And of course, if you're trying to expand the meaning of any one particular term, that takes imagination. Because again, if you were to say something like, my mind is on fire, right? It takes the imagination to grasp what that might mean, because a literal interpretation would say that doesn't make any sense. But that seems to be the poetics of language itself, which is that words open up new horizons of not just intellectual grasping, but of ways of conceiving, ways of imagining different things. Okay. So,
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that it's part of miscommunication sometimes. I think also comes from different type of imagination. Like we may be saying the same words, but we all imagine it to be in a different way. We all define it differently. So whenever we're speaking, we're like, yeah, hello. But maybe for somebody, hello is a little bit more like in the bad note because someone before like used hello just to do something bad to the person. So it's like, so he's predisposed to something negative, and you're already having the same conversation with the same words, but two people imagining the outcome of that conversation completely different. So like that's why for me it's so fascinating because imagination does comes into a big play whenever we're speaking because it's what helps us um, whenever well most people whenever they're talking they are also imagining what to say and guess what that will come into effect later on whenever the decision is. But yeah, just one thing very quick. Parker, you said reality is what you make it. And just bring this up because it's a comment you did, and now it's your turn to speak. So go
It
ahead.
was just I forget who was speaking. She was talking about like perspective and all of that and how like it's she feels it applying to her life. And I said like reality is what you make it, like because you control your own destiny technically. So when it comes to like truth and imagination, I start to think like big picture, like the future. I start thinking about like AI and stuff. So like our brain only has like so much memory. We have like 2.5 petabytes of like data we can hold in our brain. So
Not bad.
technically all types of like AI could have imagination. They just need the enough memory, right? Even though they're not like human, could I think they could be considered sentient once they reach the point of like um having enough like servers to power them, you know? Like, and it's just it's crazy to me how like far we've come from like language to now like with computers, and it's just meshing to a point where like us, even as like people, just can't even grasp what the future has to like hold. I just thought that was interesting.
Okay. And was that also, I mean, was that just explaining the text, or that was exactly what you wanted to say?
So when you guys started talking about I think it was like Asian cultures, how they're completely different. I instantly went to the Japanese because they're like on another level of intelligence. Like Bill Gates said something to them about a vaccine, and he said, "We'll give you guys a different one," because they reacted differently. They said they thought that they were gonna get like vaccines that were gonna like harm them or something or whatever, and Bill Gates made it clear to them that they get a different one. So like they're on another level, I think. And I just started thinking more and more and came to
Mm.
this.
I'm not completely sure if I understood the reference. I do believe that we think differently, and I'm not completely sure if there is a different type of level, like that we can say these people just because they speak this language, they're more smart or not. All I can think is that the way we analyze our surroundings, the way we process information depends very like very much on how you how the words you manage and how the structure of the sentences that your culture gives you. Because, for
I think
example,
it all stems to culture, like how
Mhm.
people are raised. They're raised because of this, and like Japanese culture in general is very like strict, and they have it like set a certain way, and everyone's under the same roof. They're always like on the same team, I guess.
Yeah, in my case, I grew up with having so many definitions of the same word that I'm very, like, I can mold the word so much. And some people say, "Where are you so creative?" It's I grew up talking like that. For me, it's just normal. But for other people, they're more strict in that kind of sense. So it's just different. That doesn't make me special. I just grew up in a different environment. Um, but yeah, and that's why I also value so much the fact that you are able to recognize different languages and to know other type of languages and their words, because that also you start to understand how they process their information and you're able to connect better with them. Um, but yes, I see that, Susan, I don't see you, but I also see that you wanted to circle back to Orlando. So I see. Yeah. So yeah, you have the exclamation. So it's your turn. Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I don't want to share my screen because I'm worried that I'm going to mess up and take too long. But have you guys heard of Francisco Goya, the artist?
Yes.
Okay. So Orlando said something that made me think of a quote that was in a critical thinking book by Simon Blackburn. And in his introduction, he includes a quote from Francisco Goya. And I've never really stopped to think about the quote. And I'm not even sure now is the time or place, but maybe in a future talk, we can do something on philosophy and art, and talk about the relationship between reason and art and, logic and imagination and creativity. I think that would be an interesting talk in and of itself, maybe with art students or the people over there. That would be awesome, different. But he has this quote, so I'll just read it to you. But he said, "The dream of reason produces monsters." Not really sure what he means by that, but it sounds really cool. So the dream of reason. Imagination deserted by reason creates impossible, useless thoughts. Still not sure what he means. Then he says, united with reason, imagination is the mother of all art and the source of all its beauty. I don't need to get us into a discussion about that, but there's something going on there or in our discussion that made me think of that. So maybe we can bookmark that for a future discussion. So that's all. Orlando's points made me think about that.
Can we put Can we put that quote in the chat? I think that'd be good.
Yeah. That's easier to bookmark for sure. So yeah, and what you're mentioning is also making me think of all the times that there were a couple of thinkers who were condemned by their thoughts and their imaginations because most people couldn't even grasp that that could be a possibility, and then we are here and we say, you know what, it was actually true. Their their imagination was on point, but I mean, I guess some people are not that willing to imagine other stuff that could change too much how they live. But I see, George, you're next. You seem to be talking about AI, I think.
Yeah, what Parker was saying about artificial intelligence and imagination just got my attention because that subject's very interesting to me. I'm not sure I can answer my question here. Really, this is something that I've been kind of grappling with. A major theme of the Blade Runner movies, which I love, is that human is as human does. So these super advanced is something happening that I'm not in on?
Yeah, I skipped Orlando. It's okay. He needs some skipping. It's okay. He
I'm
can go.
gonna let Orlando go first then.
I'll just make mine really brief, I guess, just because you're already kind of getting to your point. I guess it kind of relates to something what Susan was saying, and then also I think Parker was saying as well. But I think there has to be a distinction made in what imagination and the purpose that it serves. I mean, there is some imagination that's just sporadic, that kind of just comes out of nowhere. We have it in dreams, we have it maybe daydreaming, or some of it that's a little bit more used for utilities. When you're asking an architecture to think up a building, it's a utility, essentially doing it for that purpose. And so when you think, when you're in a dream, you don't have a reason for it, it just happens. And so when you think about the two and how maybe that relates once again to language, I think language in that sense, and if you look to just pick it apart too much, I think it limits imagination in that sense. I think going back to the idea of the artist, when you really immerse yourself into something that you're passionate about, you kind of start to dream about it. You start to become it in a sense, I guess. And what I'm saying is, like, I remember at one point when I'm an engineering major and I was taking so many math classes and I was doing all this homework. I remember I would be waking up and in my dream I'd be thinking about numbers. Like, it'd be essentially I'd start dreaming about numbers and doing equations, and it'd be really weird. I know, it's like, what? That's so random. But I imagine that people that are artists, people that are architects, so on and so forth, whatever you are, what field you're in, is that you start to dream about it. You start to become it in that sense. So, like, for me, I've always had this appreciation for artists because what you're surrounding yourself around, what you're creating the environment around for yourself is something that's out of this world in a sense. Is you're constantly looking at things that are surreal. You're constantly looking at fantasies. You're constantly looking at things that just aren't really of this realm. And you're not only taking that and building your own, but you're prolonging it, extending it, and becoming it. It becomes a part of yourself, an extension of yourself. And I thought that's pretty interesting. But I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's all good. I mean, I would like to say something, but George, you were speaking. I don't want to cut you. You don't have to be short just because of that. I
Okay.
just,
Well, sorry about that, Orlando. I'm glad you got to go because I wanted to. What you were saying about language limiting our imagination, right? That if we're taking what we're talking about seriously, right? Language limits our reality to a certain extent because we can only get to reality through language. So that thing, that imagination that helps us go beyond language into that like hazy realm of reality that's on the other side, can a computer really do that? Like, is it really an issue of just having enough memory or advanced programming to be able to break through that barrier of language to get to the mystical thing called reality that we're all trying to get to and all trying to express with our words? I don't know. And if a computer can do that, does that mean that they're human person? Does that mean that we should treat them as people? And if they can't do that, does that mean that we should not treat them as human people? Beats me. That is for someone way smarter than me to answer,
that's for
but
someone with more
maybe one of
imagination.
yeah, it's
No.
beyond my imagination. I need to know the details of how this AI is actually working. So
I,
great topic, Parker.
Well,
I
if
know
it's
you
like
said want to say
oh,
something. Well, okay, no, hey, this is a good discussion. We can go like ting. So I can just, this is my part of the job. I just need to direct.
well,
So it's
going
okay.
back to what Orlando said, like with AI, if it's like prolonging itself, can it just build itself higher and higher and higher and keep going and like break forth imagination we've never even seen before?
I'm kind of
Like, can it
staying
just
quiet.
keep shooting?
I'm gonna like I like that you guys are bringing AI up because if you guys ask everybody else, I'm kind of like always the AI guy. But I think as of right now, there's no way of telling. But if we're supposed to believe that AI can facilitate the same kind of workings of our minds, I think they can, in a sense, something Manzi has said, become more human than us, if that makes any sense. So, like, basically, they can essentially maybe emphasize the qualities of our imagination that we just don't even understand. Perhaps the ongoings of our mind and how it comes up with all these things, and maybe this idea of a consciousness, perhaps we just don't understand it. Maybe something like an artificial intelligence can do even more with that, and I think that's exciting. But that's it.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. And I agree with Orlando. It's too soon to tell, but I eventually when they can do that, if they are not already doing it, like I'm just not sure, like if just make them more human or not. I just think that they are just an entity on its own. They just have different. Like we will have to define really what is a human being. For me, just human being is like this. I mean, if they are able to do what we do or more, even if it is similar to us because we created it, I think that there's still gonna be something, just not human beings. But that's just me. Um, okay, so next is Nancy.
All right, yeah, I don't want to diverge from this AI tangent. I think it's a good one, but I want to kind of circle back to something that was discussed earlier. So I'm going to try to synthesize these 2 points. Well, first of all, getting back to something Susan was asking. So if you're curious as to what the topics are going to be from now to the end of the semester, you go to the files tab on this very Teams page. You can bring up the spring 2021 schedule, and you can see what we're talking about from now until the end of the semester. And you'll see we have monthly themes, and the last monthly theme is art. So we will be talking about it. Having said that, yeah, I wanted to discuss those who are maybe polylingual, because again, we're trying to tie back to the idea of truth here, and it's like, again, I am not polylingual, unfortunately. I mean, a little bit, but not really. And so, also going back to something that Orlando was getting at. Do you ever have the experience of trying to articulate or express something in one language, and when you try to do it in a different language, something gets lost in translation, or you feel as though you might have these various languages at your disposal, but one seems like the truest form of the expression of what you're saying? I think if you have that, that might be something that is very indicative of the nature of language in its relation to, again, truth, maybe objectively speaking, but more specifically, the truth of what you're trying to get across in any given conversation. Another way to put it might be like this. Consider the poetic imagination. Again, the imagination that's very much concerned with words. That kind of imagination is what brings us things like metaphor, simile, all the different poetic devices. Could you imagine an AI agent as a poet? Because if we're talking about what makes a human human, I mean, it seems like it's the very wrestling with the art. It's the very attempt to try to build your truth in a way that is, again, verbal, and then express it in a way that hopefully can convey as much as possible what it is that one is trying to get across to other people. Again, it's worth noting that the Greek word, the ancient Greek word for build or make, is poiesis. That's where we get the word poetry from, because the ancient Greek philosophers believed that the most difficult thing to build was something with words, which requires, again, imagination. And all right, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah,
Like, what would a robot poet?
I must say this: if the most difficult thing to create is by words, then they're killing us. And at university, they're killing us. They are milking us too much essays. Like, but anyways, I know that Yusha, you're next, so go ahead.
I don't know if, okay, there, that works. Real quick, George, Orlando, and Parker, great discussion. Orlando and Parker, I'm going to need you guys to back me up. AI is basically a process where a human is feeding this sets of data into a program, basically, and we call that neural networking. Like, they're programming a brain for the artificial intelligence, right? And that is how it learns and automates itself. So a couple of days back, I think I saw something about Google had built an AI, which built an AI to outperform the man-made or programmed robots. So in terms of imagination, no, we could not have been imagining this kind of stuff. And can robots imagine? Maybe, yeah, because there is a tool online that you can use, and you can put in these filters, and this artificial intelligence gives you a face, a human that does not exist. Like, FBI have tried it, and that face does not match anything in their system. So can an AI imagine? I believe so, yeah, because the conversation that you have with your home assistant, for example, Alexa, Google Mini, or whatever else there is, that is a very small, archaic example of artificial intelligence. Like, when you tell Alexa to order something off of your grocery list, it learns that how many times in a month do you buy that item. and then it keeps it in its memory, and then it suggests you when the time comes to buy it again. So is that a human interaction? Very basic, very caveman-like, but yeah, I would say artificial intelligence is capable of experiencing and displaying imagination. So with that being said, Professor Manzi, I'll come back to what you said, and Ferdinando can agree that it happens a lot that when we're trying to explain something, we think of the language that it's easier to explain in, but then we have to translate it into English or any other language that the group does speak. So, for example, Ferdinando and I speak a very small amount of French, but Ferdinando is fluent in it. And sometimes we have expressions in French that we don't have in American English. So it's difficult for us to convert it into English and present it in a matter of speaking.
I mean, I would add something. Well, first, I'm not sure exactly the noun. I don't know why, but I'm needing to define a little bit more what imagination is, because at least when it comes to a computer, for some extent, at least in my mind, they're programmed to build to some extent. So yeah, they can mix with whatever is it that they're programmed, but can they go beyond that, like beyond what the human built them to do? And I'm assuming that we as humans, we also have our own capabilities, limitations. Sorry, we have our own limitations, but we seem to be expanding our imagination as we grow. But we don't have anybody who's like touching our brain, and like we're just kind of like the environment is changing as well. At least so far, it seems like a computer, once it gets these limits, we need to update them so they can expand. It needs to be like an external influence that is kind of like doing it. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I may be missing some information, but that's what I'm trying to see, like exactly what is imagination. Because yeah, a computer can start like mixing and doing certain features until they find something that is not in the computer because they're designed to be that fast. So I think it's probably reasonable for me to see that happening.
Can I respond to that, Fernando?
Yeah, sure.
I think that's it's a good skepticism, but I don't know. The way that AI, artificial intelligence, are being made is not necessarily like we're programming them in a sense. It's like we're actually trying to build artificial neural networks. Essentially, we're giving these machines the tools to think on their own. So
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
they're
there's
trying.
this artificial intelligence that's named AlphaGo, he's actually beaten some of like the top gamers in the world. And the specific quote I'm looking at right now, it's like they're saying, "Oh, that was not a human move. I've never seen a human play that move before." So it's like no one told him to do that. Also, there was some NVIDIA chips, like artificial intelligence, they were making for self-driving as well, and they started to see that they were actually learning human characteristics in driving and actually being able to maneuver around them. And that's something, once again, they didn't even intend for that. So often what we're finding with these artificial intelligences is that they're doing things that we didn't even know they were capable of. So I think, as someone else had already referred to it, but one of the best things I've heard, best quotes about it, is that the best artificial intelligence will be made by another artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that we're still not in that point. But that's why I'm trying to define what imagination truly is. And when it comes to words in different languages, it does happen to me that sometimes I even, in looking to say something, I forget other words, the same word, but in another language. It gets confusing. And sometimes you're trying to use how you will use it in one language to the other one, and it makes zero sense here. It's like, okay, I need to reassess myself. So it's confusing, because we all have an intentionality and a direction whenever you speak that is different from all, even if you have the same root. But okay, that is that. Let me see. I see Osita is next.
Oh, yeah. I have bad signal, so I might like cut out or something. But I guess, I don't know. I guess what I wanted to say is I don't know if imagination is necessarily like what makes us human, because I feel like imagination, maybe as I understand it right now, is is just kind of problem solving, but just like depending on how far you want to take it or what you want to do. Like I mean, you know, if you're building something or you're I don't know, writing poetry or something, you know, you're solving a problem. I want to write a poem, right? So how do I do this? I have to take the words that I know, I have to put it together in a nice way. There are parameters that within I have to work, you know, iambic pentameter and all this stuff. So I have to play the rules of the game to write nice poetry. Um, and I think I can't remember who mentioned it, but oh yeah, it was Orlando, because you said you're an engineering major and you said you would dream in like math, and I can relate to that because I was a biology major. When I took organic chemistry, I would like dream chemistry and I would see it everywhere. And it's a weird. I think that's this doesn't have anything to do with language, but like I think that's a weird thing that happens with both artists and I mean with everyone. It doesn't have to be an artist, but like I was watching, I can't remember what documentary. And it was about the Beatles. You know, it was about Paul McCartney and how he like dreamed the tune to Yesterday or something like that. Or you know, Elon Musk gave an interview once where he's like, since he was 6 years old, his brain has just been exploding with ideas or something. And these aren't like language per se, but it's their imagination, and they are sort of, I still view it as problem solving, bringing it to life. Because animals will, you know, animals solve problems. You know, apes use simple tools. They have to imagine like, hey, what if I use this stick to get some more, or you know, we've all seen videos of like cats opening doors. You know, they have to like, you know, what if I jumped up there and like pulled down on that lever? They have to, you know, yeah, I would think they have to imagine it in their mind, and they're like, all right, yeah, let me try to do it. But yeah, I don't know if because so I don't know if imagination is the thing that makes us human. I guess was what I wanted to say. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's not the only feature that makes us human. Otherwise, it will be so sad. We're not that special then. Juana is asking if whether or not language limit our imagination, and I will say yes. I've seen it, but it's just my personal opinion. Okay, so Susan, you're next.
Okay. All right. So getting back a little bit more to the core question and theme, I'm enjoying the AI that gets back to identity and all that other stuff. But I'm thinking, I'm circling back now, my second circle back, by the way, to Manzi, and he talked about being polylingual. Yeah. Ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen, aber ich denke, dass you won't mich verstehen. I had to put my English word in there. So I've learned some German, and I suffered learning German, as one might. My Roots are Alsatian on my father's side, as I have said, and I've lived off and on in Germany. So in Wiesbaden, Berlin, a boring little town called Bielefeld. And my former partner, 12 years, was German, like German. His father, and I don't say this with pride, just to help you understand the context of how much German culture I have received, is his father was actually a Nazi, a high-ranking Nazi, and he detested his father. And it was interesting to learn his language in many ways. And, you know, Manzi was asking about, you know, polylingual culture. And so that got me to thinking about a book I had read. I forgot what it's called, but I think it's called Language Culture. And so the idea is when we learn the language, we are at the same time learning a culture. And I very much felt that as I was learning German, okay? And so, you know, it was that there's that point. I don't have a lot more to say about that right now, but I did realize as I was learning German how they have specific ways of looking at reality, and why did they have this word versus that word to understand reality. The thing is, when you are learning a language and hence learning culture, you're at the same time then looking or getting a perspective, at least a collective general perspective through language of how to look at reality, how to slice it up. I'm not sure, but in Alaska, isn't there a group of indigenous people who have like 22 names for what we might call snow? My words do not slice up that element of the universe, of the earth, environment in so many ways. But our language through culture can dissect reality into multiple, in numerous ways, whereas another culture may not dissect reality in as many ways with words to name those dissections of reality. So anyway, just some random thoughts, nothing very coherent, but again, I'll go check the list, Manzi, to see if that's a future topic over there, language culture. But I think that's also very interesting as well for us to work with if we have a linguistics department and talk to them about language, philosophy, and culture, those people. Okay, I'm sorry, that's it. Bye.
It's okay. Thank you. Right, so following up a little bit more the queue, we have some robots poets there. So go get that picture there and look at it if you are interested in how robot poet would look like. Very fancy. We also have Mata Liliana. You are saying that she thinks language is not the only thing that limits our imagination, but something else that limits is that our culture and traditions that we grew up with. There is also times where we imagine things as I speak. That's true. Then we have more responses here. But imagination in AI is only what we as humans let it know, right? Maybe AI is just reasonable deduction. It can be. We have some people here who are more than able to defend the AI. They are definitely going to go with the Skynet. Whenever we're fighting the Skynet, they're siding with Skynet, that's for sure. I see you. Next one in line is George. Yeah.
Now, am I really the next one this time, or
Yeah, you are.
Okay, so like this conversation really just made me think of the book 1984 by George Orwell, and I don't know how many of y'all have read that, but it is about a totalitarian government that is just trying to stamp out any trace of human independence, originality, any resistance whatsoever, so that the government is just all powerful. So in the book, one of the things the government does is they deliberately, intentionally, and systematically shrink language down. The idea is if they shrink language enough, they will literally be able to stamp out a rebellion before it even starts, because people won't be able to even think of the words rebellion, resistance, freedom, individuality. Like, they will have squashed the language down so much and confined people's imaginations to such an extent that no one's even going to be able to think about resisting them, literally won't be able to think about resisting them. So I don't know, my question, like, I agree in general, language limits how we think, and we can use our imaginations, right, come up with new words sometimes to expand how we think. Is that really realistic to think that if someone is able to get a hold of the controls of language, could they really squash it down to such a great extent? Or would the human imagination and spirit persist and expand the language anyway? What do y'all think on that?
Yeah, I like it because that's I believe part of what we're trying to get into this conversation. Like, yeah, like I feel like it will make it definitely harder for people to think on rebellion because they will have to spend time trying to define what that concept is. But I am assuming that there was a moment where we didn't have rebellion as a word. So that action will transcend eventually into something different. It will have a different word, a different imaginary, and it will be associated with something different, and we will use it in different connotation. It will transform, but not in that word. That's what I think. And I'm sure that maybe Nancy wants to say something in that regard too. If you want to.
Yeah, sure. I'll respond quickly. Because the queue is blowing up here, so we gotta. I want to hear from those students, but I mean, yeah, it kind of ties back to what Susan was saying. Again, Professor Carrillo was saying, which is that okay. Well, let me take one more step back, actually, because the question arises, like, if somebody feels as though he or she or they are being somehow taken advantage of, then the phenomenon comes first. The feelings, the emotions, the pain, the suffering. And then it's through that experience that one maybe invents or imagines a new term for this. Like, hey, what's happening now is not like anything we have in our vocabulary. So we imagine a new term for it. If anybody's ever studied like linguistics or language history, you know about etymology, which is trying to get to the root of a word. And oftentimes the root of a word comes from direct experience. It comes from a combination of direct experience and this amalgamation of words that already exist. So it's like, well, okay, we'll take something from like the sound that we make for pain and the sound that we make for unfairness. And then we put them together and we have this new term to describe this new experience that everybody is kind of collectively sharing. And so this ties back to what Susan was saying about this idea of how different languages, they're doorways, they're portals into a culture. But what does that mean? It means that, or it suggests at least, that terms are inherently value laden. So imagination is tied to not just perceiving reality, but bestowing upon it a value. So different words, different lexicons, different languages, they convey different values. They convey different evaluations of how to size up experience. And so again, if your experience is, oftentimes with snow, and you deal with snow in all these different ways, you're going to have all these different terms for snow. I don't know much about German per se, but I from what I can recall, it's the way that their language is constructed. And Susan, please, feel free to correct me. It's a lot of like attachments. So the word for, again, this is an example. So the word for doorknob is like the thing that attaches to the door that allows it to open, or something along those lines. And again, so you can see how poesis, they build with words, I guess a communication that conveys the experience of what it is to use a doorknob. Okay, again, I want to hear back from all the other people in the queue, so I'll stop it at that. But yeah, just building.
Okay, thank you. So yes, we have Nora, which is saying that she believes AI does not have conscience, that you can make a code new things, but it cannot have humans or human quality, or cannot be humans or have human qualities. To which Yusha responded that maybe that is one of the most debated topics. We just don't know yet. Let's go continue. Cannot read all of you, sorry. I see Liliana, you. No, I'm not gonna, oh, actually, Nancy, you were next. But I don't know if you want to speak right now. So Yusha is next. Sorry, I'm not reading all the text. Normally I would, but we're already reaching the hour in this meeting, so I cannot listen to this.
Yeah, I'll just bring it back to I forgot. Imagination, yes. Sorry. Imagination. So there's a movie on Amazon Prime called Bliss. It has the oh wow guy from Around the World in 80 Days, Owen Wilson. And in the movie, we are only shown that this guy supposedly comes from the future, and he's here to kind of understand how people used to live in the past. But then suddenly we're given hints that he is a drug addict, and all of that was just in his mind. So every wound, every encounter, every cut, slit, word, whatever, everything that he experienced was in his head, yet those marks remained on his body. So taking it back, I'm surprised no one brought up the Matrix series from back in the day. Yes, I was born 1997. Yes, I am that old. So I'm surprised no one brought up the Matrix series from all that time, and that's the perfect iteration of imagination and language, because this guy, he just woke up from a womb of liquid he doesn't know, and he starts communicating with these people, but what he speaks of, no one understands, like not the language, the iteration, the meaning behind it, because he has seen or experienced in his imagination stuff that those other people have not, because at the end he was the one who takes down the spiders, robots, or whatever, artificial intelligence. There's more reason to hate artificial intelligence, yay. But yeah, his George, but yeah, his imagination, as we put it, was his reality. I mean, he was convinced that there is another place out there, and in the last part, when he goes above the robot city and sees what the world truly is, the mountains, the sunrise, the plants, and everything, he comes to the realization that, oh my God, we've been living in such a bad place. So it's not necessary that imagination is always in your head. It could be something that you might have seen or know of subconsciously, that keeps pushing you, that you keep thinking of, and eventually when you find it, then you find like, okay, my purpose is now complete. So I think great movies to watch. And another thing that I always bring up in Philosophy Club, if you've not read A Brave New World, please do. You're gonna understand a lot about language, culture, imagination. It's just a big ball of philosophy. When I first read it, I did not know I was reading, but I pushed through it, and now I've read it like 4 or 5 times already. So please do go ahead and read A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. You can also get the audiobook. I think it's on YouTube or something. If anyone wants, just send me a private message. I'll send you a link.
Advertising.
Of
Yeah,
course, of
of
course.
course.
Uh, I
Any
s-
money is not
I'll
going
just
to
put a
that
label in
Scottish
here.
Philosophy Club, but it will go to Joseph's pocket. Go to Amazon. And you maybe put the code, you get 15% discount through the repurchase.
If you're a Dallas College student, of course.
Of course, of course. All right. I mean, I don't see any more in the queue. That's basically it for today. Again, just check us out in social media. It seems like you get some extra point whether you follow us in Instagram or whatever. So I've heard. If not, mea culpa. You can always just try. You see, you're gonna increase like by 10 points in your GPA, whatever. I don't know. Besides that, just remember every mail that we send is packed with information that you may need throughout your semester. So if you are not receiving any email, or you rather have that information in your personal email, just so you don't miss anything, just let us know, and I can just do that very quickly and just see.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick shout out to the queue. I mean, the chat is fantastic right now. Again, I know we're already so over time, so I guess we got to cut it short, but I really appreciate all the contributions going down there. And again, Yusha, thank you for responding to those. Feel free to take advantage of the chat and have y'all's own conversations in there. I mean, that's totally appropriate. Also, I wanted to mention this as well. We will be having another installment in the film series, the Philosophy and Film series, coming up a week from tomorrow. We got a few films on the table where
Already.
yes, and so I think like today's topic and today's discussion, both in the chat and in the video, is going to sort of help us narrow it down. But yeah, if you're interested in kind of watching a movie with us and then kind of talking about the film afterwards, it's a lot of fun. Please feel free to join us. It'll be we'll open it up at 4 o'clock 1 week from tomorrow. So yeah, we open up this very room at 4 p.m. and then at 4:30 we begin the screening. And yeah, we watch the movie, ends usually around 6:30, and then we have a conversation for about an hour or so, depending. But yeah, I mean, I invite everybody to join us, especially if you are really feeling this conversation and you are engaged. I mean, it's only going to continue and it's going to get more in depth. So please join us a week from tomorrow. Again, film TBD, but look for the announcement. It'll come via email. If you're not on our email list, again, send in a private message to Fernando, or you can put your email address in our chat, and we'll add you to the email list. We send weekly emails, sometimes once a week, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. Or you can go to our Instagram page and you can see advertisements for our upcoming events. And yeah, just great to see everybody. What a fun conversation.
Yes,
time.
and again, next topic for next week will be set by a student. We're gonna be sending an email with like a form that you can fill. Please fill it out, and one of your topics might be the one that we're gonna be using for the next meeting. So be on the lookout. That's why it's important for me to know where to reach you so you can participate with us. And yeah, you don't have to. I mean, thank you. I will save this, Nora. But if you feel more, you want to be more confidential, you can just direct message me and I deal with the rest. Okay. I don't think I'm missing anything. Beside one of you, if you want to, and you're active with the Philosophy Club, we can have you in the future installment for the student highlight. So we can promote you also in our website on Instagram. And yeah, thank you so much for your participation. And think about it. I need to do this because Mansi, he likes that. Just fan service.
Think about it.
That's all. Okay.
And by the way, check us out on YouTube if you want to see previous meetings. Again, every meeting we have gets recorded and posted to YouTube. We have 10 semesters worth of meetings on our YouTube channel. So go back and check us out. We've been at this for a while, and it's only gotten better and better. So yeah.
We also have radio shows. They're listed on the website if you want to go take a look. Feel free to do so. I think in the beginning of the chat, I had already put the web address to the website.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Until next week.